Penguin Random House Audio presents The Ghost Notebooks by Ben Dolnick. Read for you by Graham Halstead and a full cast. For Elise and Nishant, handrails in the dark. Look, just as time isn't inside clocks, love isn't inside bodies. Bodies only tell the love. Yehuda Amichai. Part 1.
Sign at Wright Historic House. Buried in this small family graveyard are Edmund and Sarah Wright, as well as their eldest child, William. What do you notice about the gravestones? Can you read what's written on them? How do you think these stones might have looked when they were first placed in the ground more than 100 years ago? We ask that you not touch the graves, but please feel free to write a message to the Wrights, let your imagination run wild, and to place it in the box.
1. Let me explain, first of all, that I was never one of those people who believed even a little bit in ghosts. I knew people who did. People with office jobs and shoe inserts and wallets stuffed with sandwich punch cards. And I could never quite hide my bewilderment when I realized that they weren't kidding. Even Hannah was ghost curious, although she wouldn't admit it. She used to ask sometimes in her "I promise I won't think less of you" voice whether I'd be willing to sleep alone in a cemetery. Many of these conversations took place during bleary pre-dawn taxi rides, since our route to the airport happened to pass a town-sized cemetery near our apartment. You wouldn't be at all scared. Of course I'd be scared, I'd say. But what I'd be scared of would be that meth addicts might stab me, or that I'd die of frostbite, or that I wouldn't get any sleep because I'd be using a rock for a pillow. This all feels bizarre to think about now, obviously. But if I'm going to tell you this story, then I need to recreate my state of mind from before I knew anything about ghosts, or death, or anything, really. Which means, among other things, revisiting a part of my life that makes me want to curse and weep and pound my forehead with regret. But I can handle it. I'm fairly sure I can handle it. I'll start with the night a couple of years ago, when we were still living in our big, weird apartment in Astoria, and Hannah suggested, in a voice not much different than if she'd been proposing an answer in a crossword puzzle, that we move upstate to a town neither of us had ever heard of. "Look," she said, turning her laptop toward me. Director, Edmund Wright Historic House, Hibernia, New York. The director of Wright Historic House, WHH, lives on site in a beautifully preserved home from 1750, where he or she is responsible for maintenance of the property as well as the development and implementation of programs for schools and for the general public. Applicant must have background in museums, strong knowledge of 19th-century American history, as well as love and appreciation for the Hudson Valley area. Familiarity with maintenance of unique homes, a plus. Unique isn't a good thing when they use it like that, I said. We could try it. Just see what it's like. I don't want to know what it's like. I'm going to email them. Do whatever you want, I said, standing up to gather some dishes I had no intention of washing. The windows were open and a fire truck was screaming its way up 24th Avenue. This was the middle of May, a part of the year in New York when the smells have begun to stew, and no one can believe that spring, all of it, was that one pleasant week in April. Hannah and I were in a relationship tunnel, and it wasn't at all clear to either of us that we'd get out of this one. The problem, one of the problems, was that we'd been together now for 3 years, and she, at 29, had decided, without ever quite saying so, that we either needed to get married or break up. Our fridge had become a collage of other people's save-the-date cards. Our credit card bills went all to flights to cities we didn't want to visit, where we sat sulking in folding chairs and pretended to be surprised when the bride appeared. I knew that I could solve our problems by proposing to her, and I knew that any remotely competent therapist would tell me that my reluctance had nothing to do with Hannah and everything to do with the fiasco of my parents' marriage. But I couldn't. I might, I thought, be one of those people who never get married at all, who argue in a superior tone that the entire thing is an archaic and ridiculous institution. Or I might want very much to get married, just to someone other than Hannah, someone who would render the entire decision simple. Or maybe this present state, this muddled, seasick, doubtful queasiness, was just what it felt like for someone with my particular disposition to want to get married, and I should just get on with it. The upshot, anyway, was that I avoided any subject even tangentially related to marriage, and she ground her teeth that night, and we both dreaded a creamy envelope in the mailbox like the black spot in Treasure Island. "And what? I'd be a farmer?" I said from the kitchen. But another fire truck came roaring after the first one, so she could get away with pretending not to have heard me. A component of our trouble, the thing that had taken our discontent from the back burner and poured it directly onto our laps, was that Hannah had, a few months earlier, been laid off. It happened in winter, during an ice storm on a Friday afternoon. She called me crying from the break room, and my first thought was that one of her parents had died. "Is everything okay?" "No," she said. "She was getting paid off." "Paid off? Bribed?" "Not paid off, you fucking idiot. Laid off. Laid off! Fired!" For 2 years, she'd been working at the New York Historical Society on the Upper West Side, standing an hour a day on the queue, eating $11 salads on Columbus Avenue for lunch. She'd been in their exhibit research department, writing signs and brochures and scripts for the guides to recite while they led tourists through exhibits about New York's ports and Abraham Lincoln. America's most popular president, he is commonly associated with Illinois, where he made his mark as a lawyer, or Kentucky, where he was famously raised in a log cabin. Lesser known is the significant role that New York played in Lincoln's adult life. "This budget has just been a disaster for us," her boss explained. They were sitting in exactly the same positions as when he'd interviewed her. "I wish there was something we could do." We were lucky enough, i.e., we still had enough money from my job and our savings and our families, that Hannah being laid off was not an imminent practical disaster. We would, for a while anyway, be able to pay the rent and buy groceries without scrutinizing per-unit prices and keep our gym memberships. But practical disasters, it turns out, aren't the only kinds of disasters. In the weeks and months afterward, I came to understand, in a way I hadn't really when my acquaintance with people losing their jobs had been mostly via CNN headlines and Raymond Carver stories, why being laid off, even laid off from a job you've enjoyed as opposed to needed, was always high on the list of stressful things that could happen to a person and to a relationship. All of our tensions seemed now to have been dipped in a horrible radioactive juice. Some nights I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with my legs sweating, only to discover that Hannah was awake and sweating too. We were tangled together like sheets of damp saran wrap. The first visible outgrowth of her being laid off was that she decided we should move. She spent a great deal of each day demonstrating via job sites that the only jobs available in her field happened to be outside the 5 boroughs. Whether to move was, we both understood, a proxy war over whether to get married. This meant that every job offer she came across led to a tense, desolate conversation about something like the housing market in Philadelphia or the lack of public transit in Atlanta. Many nights, as we sat eating dinner, lifting our forks to our faces with the blank, weary expressions of refugees, I had the feeling that we were actors in a play. The end.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?